Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Just got back from Crypto.com Arena, where the Lakers won 128-110 to exact revenge against the Minnesota Timberwolves, who beat them in 5 games last postseason in the first round. Luka Doncic with a historic performance, 49 points, 11 rebounds, and 8 assists, nearly had a 50-point triple-double, set his Laker high with 49 points, also became the first player in franchise history to start a season with back-to-back 40-point games, and the 4th player in NBA history to do so. Just a remarkable, incredible, excellent, whatever adjective you want to use to describe it. Just, I think this was probably Luka Doncic's best performance as a Laker. And we got a lot to touch on in today's show. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, leave a 5-star review. Shout out to the what's called you guys the Laker gang, which, hey, we could go with that too. But shout out to the late night gang. Tommy Gold calling me out, says, Jovan, you predicted an L, say sorry. I am sorry. I got it wrong. And I actually pulled the reverse jinx here. And by saying they were going to lose, they won. So you guys should actually be thanking me for it. I'm just kidding. But yeah, Trevor and I predicted close losses. We were both wrong. Jason was the one who said that the Lakers are going to win. He got it right. And for those who are unaware, I'm referencing the Lakers Collective episode that we did yesterday on Thursday morning. So Lakers got the win. And my overarching thought is another Luka masterclass. And we are getting to the point right now with Luka Doncic where you can make a real case for him as the best player in the league right now. Shea and the Thunder are 2-0. He just dropped 55. Reigning MVP, reigning finals MVP. Jokic is Jokic. He had a bad game by his standards against the Warriors, but he still had a triple-double. Giannis just had a 30-20 game. The Bucks are 2-0. Wemby is, I don't even know what Wemby's doing. He's unreal. He's an alien. But with all that said, Luka having back-to-back 40-point games and keeping the Lakers in both of the, first in the Warriors game, in a game where they were turning the ball over, they were missing threes, they were missing free throws, and they were within 6 with a few minutes left. And the main reason for that was Luka and how he was playing. And then you have this performance here where I believe it was 23 points in the first quarter, if I'm not mistaken, 32 in the first half. I'm quickly going back through. He had 38 through 3, and he had 32 at halftime, and then I believe he had 23 in the first quarter. Just ridiculous stuff. And he was going shot for shot. Like, this game started in a manner similar to some of the games we saw in the postseason where the Lakers don't make the starting lineup change, which I will touch on a little bit later in the show. And Minnesota just looks bigger, faster, stronger, more athletic. They're attacking guys in early offense. They're attacking guys off the dribble. They're getting to the rim. They're hitting their threes. They get off to, I believe, around a double-digit lead midway through the first quarter. And all the while, Luka's like the only one who's getting anything going for the Lakers, and drops 23 of their 36 in the first quarter, keeps it close. That's 40-36 through 1. Then LA starts the second quarter with this group that I really liked. It was Austin, Marcus Smart, I believe, Jake LaRavia, Rui Hachimura, and DeAndre Ayton. And that group, it might have been Gabe actually to start. I think it was Marcus against the Warriors, but it looks like they've like rotated that backcourt spot. But that quartet plus either Smart or Vincent, I've really liked. They outscored Minnesota 16-14 to start the second over that 5.5 minutes. And that to me was the key stretch of the game, because without Luka and with how much he was carrying in that first quarter, the game could have easily slipped away. And I think we also saw from Minnesota's side and just like projecting out them and their season, I think they really missed Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and the drop-off from Nickeil Alexander-Walker to Terrence Shannon and Jalen Clark and Bones Highland and even Mike Conley, who only played 9 minutes tonight. Like, I think they really miss that spot in the rotation, but the Lakers won those minutes. And that to me, like staying afloat in the non-Luka minutes, was what propelled them into the run they went on to close the half to take the lead going into halftime. And then started the third quarter. Like the third quarter was certainly their best quarter of the season, through these first couple games. Of the 8 quarters, that third quarter was their best. And JJ joked after the game that Lakers actually got an opponent to call a timeout first in a third quarter for the first time in Lakers history, which I found funny. And certainly probably the first time in JJ's history. Like I'm sure there were examples last year, but it's few and far between that teams are actually having to adjust and call timeouts. The Lakers were a horrible third quarter team last year. They started this season off in the preseason and through the first game against the Warriors, horrible for third quarter team. They win the third quarter 40-31. And that quarter to me was like I used this term earlier in the preseason, and I'm going to touch on it a little bit later too, but like that was the blueprint for how this team needs to play on both sides of the ball. There was certainly defensive mistakes and there was breakdowns and guys were getting loose for offensive rebounds or knifing their way to the rim, but it didn't matter because the Lakers offense was humming at such a high level where the ball was moving. They were hitting guys out in transition and early offense, and they were just toying with the Timberwolves in both transition and the half court. So they just eviscerated them. And of course, Luka was at the head of that, but Austin and Rui were also big parts of that. DeAndre Ayton as well. But with Luka, I think the thing right now is he's playing at such a high level that, again, you can make that case for him being the best player in the world. And as long as he plays like this, like I don't think Luka is going to be the first player since Wilt to average 40 in a season. Who knows? Maybe he does. But as long as he is performing in this realm, which I believe he can, the Lakers can beat anybody. They have a shot against anybody. And really it's like, can the other guys do their jobs? Can they rotate defensively? Can they swarm defensively? Can they clean the defensive glass? Can they move the ball? Can they make shots? Can Austin carry his portion of the offense? And if they don't do those things with the way that Luka is playing, this team's going to be really good with or without LeBron. Then you add LeBron into this, and that's where they ascend to just a different level and can truly be, I think, a championship level threat. And that's like tonight was the vision for what that could be. But it starts with Luka, and the craziest stat of all with Luka that I tracked during the game is so far he is 24 for 27 on 2-pointers through these first 2 games, which is 89%. He's shooting 89% on 2-pointers, and he's just been unstoppable inside the arc. Like if you let him get downhill, he is stopping, he is popping, he's initiating contact, has several and one jumpers, which is just like, that's really tough to do. And he's doing this against 2 of the better defensive teams in the league. I would easily put Golden State and Minnesota as 2 top 10 defenses, probably top 7 or 8 defenses. And they have switchable athletic, with Golden State, it's more of a swarming defense, but they do have, I think they missed Moses Moody in that game, but they have the personnel to switch a lot and to just play this frenetic style of defense. And then Minnesota, we just saw them switch their bigs onto Luka and be fine living on an island with him. And it was a matter of like, is he going to hit a step back 3 or not? But they blitzed him. They played drop. They switched. They threw a bunch of things at him, which is what Chris Finch said they were going to do pregame. And Luka passed every test. If he switched, he either went to the step back or got downhill against the big and beat them to his spot. If they were playing drop, got downhill with floaters or spraying it out to shooters. If they tried to blitz him, okay, well, the Lakers were far more prepared in this matchup compared to the Golden State matchup with their 4-on-3s, 3-on-2s, and Rui was a really important safety valve. DeAndre Ayton and his rolling was a really big part. I thought Austin led the way with 11 assists. So Lakers came out far more prepared for everything that Minnesota threw at them defensively, and the head of the snake was Luka, and this was just a really special performance that I said at the top, it might be the Lakers' best win of the Luka era. Of course, you have to throw in the playoff win because playoff results just matter more, right? It was only one win, but you have to throw that in there. And then I think the at OKC game for me, just based on the season OKC was having and how effortlessly the Lakers blew them out in OKC, one of the toughest places to play in the league, one of the loudest road environments in the league. That, like, those two to me, I probably put slightly above this one. But to play the team that just knocked the Lakers out and also got off to that start, like the Lakers could have let go of the rope and kind of battled some of the demons that they faced in that first round series. But instead, they punched back multiple times. They landed some big haymakers, and Luka landed several knockout punches. So I think Luka's playing at an insane level right now. This is Dallas level Luka, and again with this finishing inside the arc, it's just, I don't know how you guard him. And there's also this relentlessness to Luka that's the killer instinct that you really have to appreciate. Is he doesn't let you off the hook. It's like, I'm coming every single possession. I am like unstoppable, and he's inevitable right now, right? So yeah, it's crazy. But that's my overarching thought from this game. We'll get into notable performers. Luka, of course, 49, 11, and 8 again. But Austin, I thought he got off to a little bit of a slow start. I think he started 2 for 7, but from that point on, he went 7 for 8. And he was killing Minnesota's bigs, particularly Naz Reid in switches, but also Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert. And there were some times where I thought he kind of struggled with some of the ball pressure, but I thought he progressively handled that better and just got into a certain groove and looked like the Austin that we're accustomed to. And this is where the box score can sometimes play tricks on you, right? Because he finishes with 25, 7, and 11, which is objectively better than the game against the Warriors, but like relatively similar. He had 26 and 9 against the Warriors, didn't have anywhere close to that number of rebounds, but so like more rebounds, one fewer point, a couple more assists. So it's like a relatively similar game on paper, but Austin was so much more impactful and effective and efficient in this game compared to the Golden State game. I noted previously that I didn't think he was as impactful, certainly through the first like 3.5 quarters. Then he was a part of that run that they went on in the fourth, but the game was basically decided by that point. And he got some baskets that I felt inflated his at least offensive output a bit. But this game, I thought he did a really nice job in the non-Luka minutes, that early second quarter stint that I mentioned, but also closing out the third quarter because JJ pulled Luka a little bit earlier than normal to get him back in to start the fourth. So I thought Austin, like, he was someone who you could argue struggled the most relative to expectations and his typical production in that Minnesota series. And I thought he came out and handled everything they threw at him well as well. So 25, 7, and 11, it's not Luka's numbers, right? But I thought Austin as the number 2, like, this is the type of level we need to see from Austin consistently. And again, after a little bit of a slow start and I think kind of struggling with some of the ball pressure, he lost Dante DiVincenzo around a couple screens for threes. It was starting to look like maybe continuing some of the like preseason finale struggles and the Golden State struggles. And instead he flipped the script, and I thought was a really big part of that third quarter run as well. Rui, 23 points, 10 to 13 shooting, couple threes, had a couple of big dunks. And he was the guy that Minnesota was kind of like, you have to give up something defensively, right? You can't take everything away. So he was a guy that they were willing to cheat off of, and he really made them pay with the corner threes, spot up shooting and attacking. I believe he had a big offensive rebound. Like, so like you would like to see a little bit more from Rui in terms of the overall rebounding. If he's playing 32 minutes, I'd like to see more than 2 rebounds. But from an offensive perspective of what he provided, 23 points again, and just really effective inside the arc. DeAndre Ayton was, to me, the unsung hero of the game, because we finally saw what it looked like with the Lakers having a true center on the floor and a guy who could punish mismatches and a guy who could get offensive rebounds and a guy who could stay on the floor against Minnesota, and a guy who frankly outplayed both Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid tonight. And I did Alan Sliwa's show this morning, and he asked me what would qualify as a success tonight for DeAndre Ayton. And I said him holding his own against Rudy Gobert and against Naz Reid. Like, I don't expect him to necessarily outplay both of them. I don't expect his production to be better than both of them combined, right? Because it's a two-headed monster there. But if he's on the floor and at least holding his own, if not outplaying them, I think that's a win. And he outplayed both of them. And I thought that was a real win. And I'm going to touch on his game a little bit more with one of my takeaways, but I wanted to give DeAndre Ayton his flowers, because like there are some things with the turnovers, with getting the ball stripped or whatnot that, you know, can sometimes be frustrating. And I get why some fans have reacted a certain way to his play. But I thought he was instrumental, particularly in that second half with LA extending the lead. Then Jake LaRavia, I thought, was solid in his 28 minutes. Like, the numbers aren't going to pop out, I think, for the most part with him, especially with this role. But I thought he was a big part of some of the defensive runs that they went on. And I think just the connecting and the passing offensively has been a nice thing that he's starting to fit into, you know, better lineups. He was second in the bench in plus minus and 4th overall on the team. So like, he's making an impact despite his numbers. And then like Marcus Smart and Jared Vanderbilt, shout out to my guy, Guru on X for bringing up the smokestack reference with from Sinners of compare, like they're kind of the Bash brothers for me, Marcus Smart and Jared Vanderbilt, where they come in and they just muck things up. Vando, 2 steals, 2 blocks. I thought this was his most impactful defensive performance since kind of like the first half of the preseason. And the Lakers also used him because no Jackson Hayes. They used him more as a 5. And I think that using him as a 5 and having him screen more, I think negated some of the offensive concerns with him. So that might be something to monitor moving forward. Is I think Vando as the lone non-spacer in a lineup is just more effective offensively than when he's playing with another non-spacer. So that's something the Lakers are gonna have to figure out longer term once Jackson's back. But I thought Vando was fine offensively. Like, he didn't contribute much, but he also, I thought, was in the fray with screening and handoffs and different things. And like, he was fine, right? Like, he was not a positive, but he was passable. But really on the defensive end is when he made his mark, and the Lakers were switching everything. They were swarming, they were rotating. And I thought the defensive game plan, especially when he was at the 5, worked really well. And then Marcus Smart, to me, play of the game. He is matched up with Ant. Ant tries to get by him in a way that we've seen Ant cook just about every Laker, and Marcus just rips the ball from him on his drive and pitches the ball ahead to Austin, who's streaking in transition, and he gets a layup. And that play to me was like, I don't know who else can make that play on this roster. Maybe Vando is like the one guy, but Marcus already saw Austin streaking. And that's like the rare combination he has of being a defensive savant while also being a really good passer. Like, those two things typically don't go hand in hand. So he had the wherewithal to see Austin streaking as he's ripping the ball and then immediately chuck it out to him. So I thought that was the play of the game, and Marcus with his energy completely changed things. And then let's get into stat of the night. I'm going to go with, there's a few things we could go with. I think it was interesting that 7 of the top 8 rotation players had a positive plus minus. And so most of the lineups were working tonight. But I will go with 26 of 32 at the free throw line for the Lakers, 81%. That's a market improvement on the 61% they shot against the Warriors. And that was a big swing factor. Was the Lakers were drawing a slew of fouls. They got multiple Timberwolves players into foul trouble. Looking at it quickly, You had McDaniels at 5. You had Conley. Conley only played 9 minutes because he had 4. He was just like unplayable. You had Jalen Clark with 4. Rudy Gobert had 3. So Lakers did a really good job of drawing fouls and initiating and also attracting contact from the Wolves. And they made their free throws. And this, if they shot 61% again, this is a totally different game that is much closer and potentially goes in a different direction. So I thought LA drawing as many free throws as they did while also converting them at a reasonable rate of 81%, like big bounce back for them in that regard. Also, I will give a shout out to the turnovers, only 10 turnovers as individually for the players, 12 as a team. And that only led to 8 points for the Timberwolves. Lakers also won transition 11-6. So I gave you guys 3 stats of the night. Then takeaway number 1 for me is, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but this is proof of concept for me in terms of how the Lakers should aspire to play moving forward. And one thing I do want to note and be clear on, I don't think they played a good defensive game tonight. I think they played somewhere between an above average to solid, and there's probably some semantics or nitpicking with some of that. But like looking at it, I have this plugin that does offensive rating and defensive rating off of the box score. And according to this, and there's some noise with some of this stuff, but Lakers had a 118.5 defensive rating, which is not good. Now they had a 138 offensive rating, which is like mind blowing. And that would shatter the all-time record for like best offense. But point being, like, I think, as I've said continually from the beginning of the season, this group is going to win by being a top 5 offense and around average defensively. This was like league best offense and bad, bottom 7 or 8 defensively. And there will be nights where this happens, but I think this is the blueprint of like LA had some great defensive stretches and they had great individual defensive possessions, right? And Smart and Vando were 2 key cogs in that. I thought Luka had a little bit of a slow start defensively, but once again, similar to the Golden State game, they were trying to pick on him and he was holding his own. And that's another thing I wish I mentioned earlier, but like Luka, I thought held up really well in ISOs and switches. They kept finding where's Luka's man, have him come screen. Let's try to get Ant or Randall downhill against him. And he was holding up just fine. So I think the proof of concept here is like the Lakers can go on defensive runs and they can have good stretches of defense. But this team, I just don't think over the course of 48 minutes is going to be like a consistent defense or even a good. And even tonight, they had, like, looking at the first and third, right? First quarter, they give up 40. Third quarter, they give up 31. Now, second and fourth was a bit of garbage time and whatnot. But I think it's there for them to be around an average-ish defense. And that, to me, is just enough or just good enough if you are a top 5 offense, in which I believe this group can be. And I think tonight showed that. And the thing with the Lakers for me that I think we're starting to see a little bit more is like they have so many guys who are just smart offensive players and smart passers. And it starts, of course, with Luka, LeBron, and Austin, and they're right now without LeBron. But beyond that, like, I think Jake LaRavia, I've mentioned his connectivity offensively, and he's a guy who will make the extra read and he'll do the swing. And they had a lot of hockey assists tonight, right? Where a guy hits a guy in the wing and then he hits the guy in the corner, or a guy hits the guy in the middle of the floor, then he sprays it out to corner or wing. And then, that guy either shoots a 3, attacks a closeout, whatever. So just the ball movement tonight was really special. And they ended up only with 26 assists, which their goal every night is 30. So that was a little bit below that. But a lot of the reason why they only had 26 was because Luka just did so much cooking individually that I think in like the non-Luka scoring possessions, I would assume that though, like, that's a pretty high assist rate, taking out like Luka's just individual brilliance. But I think this is the blueprint for this group of, again, having 3 guys drop 23 or more. Like you could see that moving forward once LeBron's back, of that's what you're going to expect with Luka, LeBron, and Austin. But Rui having a big night, DeAndre Ayton having a big night. I think the scoring is probably going to be largely funneled through those 5 guys of Luka, LeBron, Austin, DeAndre, and Rui. Gabe, it'll just kind of depend on if he's making shots that night, but he hasn't been as involved as he was in the preseason. Marcus and Jake, I think their shot is going to kind of fluctuate in terms of like volume. So I think it's like they have their 5 guys who are probably going to be the primary scorers with a floor of like 12 to 15 points a night. And then 3 guys probably in the 20s. And that, like this to me was just the proof of concept of, if I'm JJ, that like, and I'm excited to go through the film myself tomorrow, but like there's a lot of positive to take away, especially from the way they fought back in the first quarter, that second quarter without Luka, and then with Luka, the way they closed the half, the third quarter, and then even the fourth quarter. Like there was a moment there where it was like, is Minnesota going to make this a game? Or are they going to go on a run? And the Lakers just put them away. So just an all around like impressive game for them. But I think the offensive end, with the ball movement, with the cutting, with the pace, getting out in early offense, the hit ahead passes, the way that they were running pick and rolls, all that stuff is encouraging, and all that stuff is stuff that they need to study on film and continue to apply and just refine a bit. And then defensively, I think there were some nice stretches that some equally like bad and concerning stretches, and the defense is a work in progress. But I thought, especially against Ant, like Ant's going to make tough plays and hit tough shots because he's Ant and he's special and he's he's one of the best athletes in the league, right? But the Lakers did the same thing they did last year against him and tried to do in the playoffs, where it was like there's the primary point of attack guy, then they're zoning up around the elbows and the blocks, and they're showing 5 guys at all times. I thought, especially in that third quarter, they threw some blitzing, and especially anytime anyone was below the wing with Randall or Ant, it was all of a sudden, let's throw a double and let's swarm them and make them try to kind of play out of the chaos. And I thought Minnesota really struggled with that. And I thought Rui was actually a big part of the trapping and doubling, and I thought he did a good job with that. But to me, this is the proof of concept moving forward. Like, this is how the Lakers should aspire to play, which is an elite offense and a mixed defense, an average-ish defense. Takeaway number 2 is, I mentioned DeAndre Ayton earlier, and I thought he made such a big impact on this game, particularly in that third quarter, but also just throughout with the gravity. Like we often think about gravity as a perimeter thing, right? With shooting and guys coming off screens or guys spotting up, but his interior gravity. And I think that the Wolves at first were kind of testing it, and then they quickly realized, like, oh, if we leave this guy, he's going to dunk, he's going to get offensive rebounds, he hit a couple of middies. Like, this is not Jackson Hayes. And this was a big like point of emphasis for LA this offseason when they were trying to build this roster, was finding a center for these types of matchups where they could punish a team like Minnesota, who at first was switching a lot to start the game and trying to live with a McDaniels or an Ant or whoever around Ayton. And they held up fine. I think largely in like the first quarter, he didn't have a big offensive start to the game, but I thought that there was like a war of attrition where him continually just rim running and being a downhill force just with his movement and the threat of that eventually wore down the Timberwolves defense. I also thought, I mean, he mentioned it at shoot around of how much he's worked with Luka and Austin over the last couple of days in their pick and roll timing and just spending time with those guys and each guy trying to figure out the best way to make it work. And I thought we saw real progress with Luka and Ayton, but also with Austin and Ayton. And this is going to be something that takes some time, and I expect it to look better in game 10 than it did tonight. And I expect it to look better in game 30 than it did tonight, right? It's going to continually improve. But there was some real strides, I thought, compared to preseason finale, Golden State game, and this game. And I just thought we finally saw like Ayton punishing some mismatches, getting offensive rebounds, and again, just that constant threat around the basket or in the paint. It collapsed the defense, and then that's what led to a lot of the open threes that the Lakers had, because you had Luka's dominating the middle of the floor. You have Ayton there, and of course, like a big part of this is Luka also being so special and being on fire and going supernova. That was allowing some of the slipping. But I thought Ayton's short roll playmaking and decision making was just better overall. And the way the Lakers were handling a lot of those traps or switches was, to me, a big step up from how they did it against the Warriors. And then takeaway number 3, I still think that Marcus Smart should be the 5th starter. And that was, it was funny because I was already preparing to come on here and I knew people were going to be upset if the Lakers lost this game. And with the way the game started, it was trending that way with Gabe Vincent continuing to start. And I mentioned earlier, 7 of the 8 primary rotation guys, because Dalton played in garbage time and that messed up his plus minus. So if we take away the garbage time with Dalton, Dalton got a shift. He played the first similar, like JJ loves playing Dalton for the first shift. He was actually played end of the first quarter. So he was the 3rd guy off the bench, but only played a 4-minute shift. And other than Dalton, so putting Dalton aside, because he technically had a negative plus minus, but he was positive in the non-garbage time minutes. Gabe Vincent was the only guy who had a negative plus minus, and that is skewed a little bit by that start to the game. But that is also, I think, something we have to factor in. And I just think at this point, with how much, I thought the Lakers were a little bit more selective with the switching and trying to fight through screens and not switching as passively. I think they were a little bit more aggressive and they were mixing up some coverages. But I just think putting Gabe on Ant, to me, is not the way to approach this. And again, I've made this point before, but if you are switching as much as the Lakers typically do, that negates Gabe's point of attack defense, because as we saw the Warriors spam that in the second half, they're just going to do a screening action to get Gabe off of Steph Curry or to get Gabe off of Anthony Edwards. And at that point, he becomes a liability if he's going up against a much bigger player like a Jimmy, like a Kuminga, like a Jaden McDaniels. Not even necessarily that they're going to post up a Jaden McDaniels, but offensive rebounds. Or, I mean, Jaden is really good with his footwork and taking long strides and Euro stepping to get to the basket. So I just think the one Nate I will pick with this whole process is, I think among the top 8, which again, I'm removing Dalton from, Gabe to me was the least impactful player by obviously Luka, Austin, Rui, Ayton, that goes without saying, but even compared to Laravia, Smart, and Vando, maybe it's close with him and Laravia because he had 5 assists. I did like the passing out there. I will note that, and he hit a 3, but I'm not seeing it right now. I think that's the clear weak link in the starting group. And he's not, it'd be one thing if his shooting had translated in one of these 2 games, but it just really hasn't. He's kind of just been out there offensively outside of some of the playmaking. And I think actually some of the bench groups could use that playmaking. So I would like to see Smart start, Gabe come off the bench, and then bring a little bit more offensive pop. He can maybe do a little bit more offensively if he's coming off the bench. But right now, I think that's the one negative or thing I would change. But other than that, it's really hard to complain or see anything wrong with. Of course, there's always ways you could be better. There's ways to refine and polish and be sharper. But in general, in terms of bigger picture things, I think Gabe should be coming off the bench and be playing a little bit less. And I thought it was interesting that a lot of their big runs came with him off the floor. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Jonathan Frazier. Jovan, man, they get real quiet when we win. What a night. I love fun ones like those. Time to start stacking and building W's. We're going to be all right. Yeah, this was, this is as impressive of a Lakers win, again, as I can remember in the Luka era. I think the OKC one is the one that comes to mind. And certainly they had a bunch of good wins last year. They beat Minnesota, though Ant I believe he got ejected in that one, and they were without Randall and Gobert. But they beat the Clippers a couple times. They beat the Pacers. They obviously beat the Thunder, beat the Mavericks. Pretty much beat everybody other than they beat the Knicks. They pretty much beat everybody but Cleveland, who they had played twice earlier in the season. And even with all those impressive wins and statement performances that they had, this one to me is right up there, especially factoring like the way this game started, not having LeBron. They could have easily let go of the rope and they didn't. And just a really, really impressive win. Connor Phillips, shout out to Connor. Thank you for the super chat. Third quarter brought a tear to my eye. If Laker fans didn't know, Luka is the worst stat pattern in the NBA. Once the game is secure, he's bad, always has been. Well, it was funny that they tried to get him to 50 and they kept him in. They cleared the bench, or they didn't have enough bodies to really clear the bench. So like Laravia was still out there, and I forgot who else. I think Vando was still out there, but it was Dalton and Bronny and Laravia and Vando and Luka, and he got fouled and then he missed the one free throw. So he finished with 49, but it was, third quarter was best stretch of Lakers basketball, I think by far of the season, and a lot to be encouraged by. Young Claire, this is the team that's a Wiggins and a backup big away. Yeah. I mean, this is, I agree. And now it's, if you're giving up or if you're getting Wiggins, obviously it's hard to not include Rui in that trade. And Rui was, I think, awesome tonight. Like defensively, I think individually he was, I haven't rewatched it yet. So that'll be something I know. Like I thought he was okay on the ball as like a primary guy, whenever it was Randall or Ant or whatever. But I thought his help defense and like the doubling was really impressive. And he did a solid job with that. But yeah, I mean, I think this, like in general, I think they're a 3-and-D, like the fifth starter plus a better backup. Although I think I will give Jackson his flowers. Jackson, I think to start the preseason and against Golden State, has done his job. I think there's still like another level to get to that maybe he gets to, or maybe they end up trading for that type of player. But yeah, in terms of needs, I don't think anything I've seen to start the season has changed my perception of their needs. If anything, it's reinforced it. They still need that two-way starting level wing that slots Smart and Vando more as backups. And if they get that player, they're cooking with something special, I think. Young Claire, again, Gabe, Kleba, and Dalton, and a first for Drummond, Oubre, and Grimes. I assume you tested the math here in terms of the salaries. I mean, I think their bar for trading a first is going to be high. I don't know if this quite reaches that. I do like Grimes. I wonder if like that fifth starter that we're talking about, I don't know if he quite checks that box from a defensive perspective as like a lockdown multi-positional, like I believe he's 6'5", if I'm not mistaken. So he's a little bit on the smaller, more like a shooting guard size guy, where I think ideally they have someone a little bit bigger and longer who can scale across multiple positions. But I do really like Quentin Grimes, and Kelly Oubre is, I think, a rotation bench wing on a good team. Drummond, honestly don't know if Drummond's even better than, like, Drummond versus Jackson, I think is closer than people might think, to be honest. Not that you're giving up the first, like Drummond's obviously more of a throw in here from a salary perspective, but yeah, that's an interesting one. I think the Lakers might want a slightly better player than Grimes for a first, but I think this is fair value in a vacuum, if that makes sense. Jay Hoodie, the Lakers are, I think for the super chat, the Lakers are the Dallas Cowboys of the NBA, pure offense, no defense. I did like their effort in the second half, and Luka's going to have a 06 Kobe type season this year. Third quarter curse over. We need to see a little bit more to fully exercise the demons of the third quarter, but they exercised their Minnesota demons tonight. And I thought there was like a level of resolve that was really impressive for me, because I don't know if I still have like PTSD from the Denver stuff, but it was like, it felt like every time they'd play Denver post playoffs, Denver would just hit like every shot, and it would just be basically like game 8, game 9, game 10, game 11 of continuing the playoff series. That's how this felt. It felt like game 6 of Lakers Wolves to start, like that first 5-6 minutes. And it was like, all right, here we go. Jaden is driving to the rim. Dante's hitting all these threes. Like Ant is gliding to the basket. Like they Randall hit a three. It was just like they had this explosion of they scored like 21 or 23, I think, within like 4.5 minutes or something crazy. So, but then the Lakers obviously turned things around and had a really impressive, like from that point on, they just kicked the Wolves' ass. But I wouldn't say no defense. I don't think there's going to be consistently good defense. I think they can have good defense with certain lineups and for stretches, but the defense is there are certainly limitations there. Oots of the Wee, thank you for the super chat. Impressed AF with Jake and Smart D this game. Pause. I'm going to also retroactively say pause for what I was talking about Luka. I think I said he's coming every possession. So retroactive pause on my behalf. I thought Jake was really solid defensively, and he was another guy who switching across multiple positions, funneling guys into help. I think you've seen with Jake, he is a bigger body, so he's got the strength to absorb contact on drives, which I think is something that can help where if you're not the most fleet of foot, you're not the most athletic guy, but you have he's a solid 6'7", 6'8", 235-ish type guy, and he's a guy who can absorb contact on drives, which then puts, that slows down the ball handler, that makes them have to readjust, and that moment of hesitation by trying to, drive into him, all of a sudden that's where guys can help or swarm or whatever. So yeah, really impressed with him. And then Smart, I think he's a wild man, right? Like he had a couple wild turnovers, and he will throw some passes that I said when I did my Marcus Smart film breakdown, like he's going to take some shots and throw some passes that are going to drive fans crazy. But I think it's a good type of crazy, right? Like he's just a fun player to watch. Glenn S., thank you for the super chat. Smart shifted the momentum, energized the team. JJ's lineups were better. 200 IQ move on Luka for involving DA and pick and roll and not forcing lobs. If we can sustain this play style till Braun gets back, we good. Yeah, and the Lakers, now I will note, the Lakers schedule, like Portland almost just beat Minnesota and then did beat the Warriors tonight. Granted, it was the second night of a back-to-back for the Warriors, but the Lakers will be on the second night of a back-to-back against Portland. So that's like a sneaky tough game. Portland's looked pretty good, but at Sacramento, I've already said before a couple of times this week, I'm penciling that in as a win. They should be able to beat Sacramento. Of course, Domantas Sabonis is back, so that will be an interior test for them. Like the first real dominant big, I would say they've played. Like Randall's more of a perimeter big at this point. They weren't posting him up too much. It was a lot of catch and shoot threes and jumpers. Sabonis is a guy who can do some of that, but is going to like we've seen him bully AD on the block. So that'll be a real test for the Lakers defense. That team has a lot of firepower. Levine, DeRozan, Malik Monk, Dennis Schroeder. So that's going to be a real test defensively. Probably be a track meet, high scoring game, but certainly a winnable game, a game I'm penciling in, the Lakers winning. Versus Portland at home should be another win. But again, Portland, they're young, they're athletic, they're hungry, they play really tough defense. They're good at pressuring the ball, forcing turnovers, and just wreaking havoc defensively. They have a lot of really good defenders. So that'll be an interesting one on the second night of a back-to-back. Not an easy test or just an easy game by any means, but should be another win. At Minnesota will be tough. Playing Minnesota twice in 5 days, that'll be a game they'll have probably circled on their calendar. They're going to want to get their lick back against the Lakers. And then at Memphis, you don't know who's going to be in the lineup for Memphis. They're just, I don't know what's going on over there. They got to sage the arena. They got to sage the practice facility. They just can't stay healthy. So I can't tell you who's going to be in Memphis's lineup a week from now, but should be a win, I think, for the Lakers. And they come back Miami, at Portland, playing Portland again on a back-to-back. That's going to be really tough going up there. San Antonio, with how Wemby's playing, that's going to be an interesting one. And then go out on a 5-game road trip, which could potentially be when LeBron returns. That is like going into the middle part of November, but maybe he comes back at some point later. So yeah, I mean, looking at this schedule, there are a couple of really tough games, like at Minnesota, at Portland on a second night of a back-to-back, then the road trip at Atlanta, at OKC, at Milwaukee. certainly some games that will be tough for them to win, and they could drop some of those. But I think this is a pretty winnable stretch, especially with the way that Luka's playing. And yeah, I mean, I think if they go, I think I picked them to go 9-6 to start the season. If they, and that was actually originally with LeBron, but if they can go 9-6 or 10-5 or whatever until LeBron comes back, like that's obviously a big win. Zaquan, thank you for the super chat. Love DA in second half. Need a physical center. Yeah, I thought, again, he outplayed Gobert and Naz Reid, and that notion was just, it was not conceivable going into this game, just based on what we saw in the playoffs, right? And he did get off to a little bit of a slow start, but I thought progressively looked more comfortable, and just having a center who could like play against the Wolves is a win, but having a center who started to thrive and progressively look more comfortable and better. And I thought certainly won the second half against those guys, but I think overall outclassed both of them. That's a win for LA. Kevin, thank you for the super chat. Do Grant become a new I assume you're saying Jeremy Grant here. Does Jeremy Grant become a new 3-and-D wing target? He's averaging 25.5 points on 67% shooting, 55% from three. He either drives hard to the basket or a 3-point shot and no mid-range shot. I like Jeremy Grant. I do not like his contract. I think that is this is where we're dealing with a small sample size that I don't want to pretend Jeremy Grant is going to average this the rest of the season. He's 31 years old, making $32 million this season. Will be making 34.2 the following season, and then has a player option for 36.4 million in 2027-28. I will break some news here and tell you that Jeremy Grant will be picking up that player option in 2027-2028. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that he's not getting that money on the open market. So that's just a really tough contract to take on. Like, you'd have to, just to even get to it, you have to include Rui. There's almost no way you can do that without including Rui. I guess you could do Kleba, Vincent, and Vando, but I still, with Vando's current offensive limitations, I don't see there being like a big market for Vando's services right now in that contract with a couple more years left. So I think you have to trade Rui, and if it's like Rui and Gabe or Rui and Kleba, that's a big price to give up. And maybe, I don't know, maybe, like, it's a little bit different. Maybe if Portland wants to just get off the contract and is giving you like a first or something, but even then it depends on the year with the first. Is it Portland's first? I don't know Portland's pick situation off the top of my head, but like, is it maybe a different first because they're on the rise, right? Like, I think this is a team that probably in a year or two could be, pretty decent. Right now they might be a play-in team already, probably back end, but yeah, so I think that contract is just a no-go for me. If he was on a different contract, maybe, but I've been a Jeremy Grant guy. I was previously a proponent for trading for him, but at this point, I think the contract is just, it's bad. Jay Note says, everyone liked the stream. Yeah, let's get those likes up. We got 900 of you in here. No clue what the likes number is because I can't see it until after, but yeah. Craig Osterberg, smart gives the Lakers that spark. Yeah, I mean, there's just some guys that have that intangible quality to them that you just can't really quantify. And I mean, really, if you want to quantify it, I'll give you a number here. Plus 24, the best plus minus on the team by 6 points. Smart is giving major DFS vibes right now. Like, they are ultimately different players, but I've referenced that I think he's the spiritual successor for this group. This is a introverted group, a quiet group, and outside of LeBron, there are not really a lot of talkers in that locker room in like a big way. Like, I think Ayton's a talker, but I don't think he's quite at the, I don't think he's coming in and like commanding the locker room, right? Like, so it's obviously LeBron's been there since 2018. Luka, although some of the guys have mentioned like he's more of a lead by example guy, that he's been more vocal, but he's not like the most vocal leader or player, right? So I think the Lakers need that type of guy who's going to just like be the levity in the locker room and crack jokes with guys. And, he's also, I think, a good teammate that's like dapping guys up and telling them like, good job, good shot out there, good pass, good defensive rotation. But then he's also holding guys accountable. And he's a guy who, like, Marcus Smart is not afraid of anybody. And that can be, I think, a really good thing for a group that sometimes doesn't have, like, they don't have a lot of outsized personalities. And I think that's actually a good thing overall, because when you have too many personalities, that's where there can be chemistry issues and players can clash and stuff. But I think Marcus Smart, similar to DFS, being that locker room leader and a guy who you want in the trenches, like that's invaluable. And I think already we're starting to see that impact from him. What up, Hike? Sorry. Thank you for the super chat. I just zoned out for a second. What's up, Jovan? It's Hike. How do you think we perform against the Kings on Sunday? Think Sabonis, Ayton, Levine, DeMar DeRozan, Luka matchups, etc. Yeah. So I think they're gonna start Ayton on Sabonis. Let me look at who the Kings started tonight quickly. I believe they've been playing DeRozan at the 4 because Keegan Murray's out, so they don't have their typical starters. So right now they started Sabonis, Isaac Jones, who is kind of like has a Yabusele-esque body, DeRozan, Schroeder, and Levine. If those are the matchups, I would suspect Ayton starts on Sabonis. I don't know if Gabe's like, for now, I'm going to assume Gabe continues to start, but we'll see if that changes on Sunday. In that case, I guess you put Gabe on Levine and Austin on Schroeder and Rui on DeRozan and Luka on Jones. I guess that's how you do it. Like, this is a tough team to match up with for the Lakers in like a defensive sense. Obviously, like they don't play any defense, so the Lakers are going to score 150 points on them, but they might drop 130 themselves. Zach Wan, thank you for the super chat. Excited to see/test LA's offense against Portland's defense. Drew, Thibault, Kamara, Avdia, Klingon. Love to see if we could land Ellis, Wiggins, and Okongwu. I think of those three, Ellis is the most likely with the logjam in the backcourt with in Sacramento. Wiggins, Miami, I believe. They killed Memphis tonight in part. Well, Memphis actually had Ja and Triple J. They were reasonably healthy tonight. I mean, they're without Edie, they're without Clark, they're without Scottie Pippen. Yeah, but they killed them tonight. Wiggins, 10.7 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. I think it's kind of like Ellis is probably the most gettable, then Wiggins is in the middle. Then I think Okongwu is not going to be very gettable for them. I think the price is going to be like he's starting right now. Porzingis missed the game tonight, but I think he's a young center that they like. So we'll see. Kami282, Dallas's offense is beyond horrible. Thank you, Nico. This was a backdrop to tonight's events where the Mavericks lost, and I'm kicking myself for falling into the Mavericks hype in the preseason and then having a sober reminder against the Lakers, where it was like the Lakers were struggling against like bench and G League level, like 2A offenses, and then they faced Dallas without their full squad, and they looked pretty good defensively against Dallas. So that was kind of like a red flag for me, as I mentioned after that game. But they just lost at home to Washington by double figures. They're now 0-2, and there was boos in the second half, or I believe in the fourth quarter, and not a great time to be Nico Harrison or a Mavericks fan, because they clearly are lacking in the ball handling and playmaking department, and they happen to trade away arguably the best ball handler and playmaker in the league. I mean, probably not best ball handler, because I would say that's Kyrie, but one of the best ball handlers and arguably the best playmaker are right there with Jokic. Kevin, thank you for the super chat. Mid-season trade idea. Houston gets AR. Jazz get DK plus 26. Houston first plus 27. Phoenix first plus 28. Houston first from Houston. One less pick and swap to Bane package plus 31 LAL first. LA gets Kessler and DFS. So DFS back to LA. Lakers get Kessler. They're giving up Austin and the 31 first. I don't think LA would do that. It's an interesting idea, and I think like you're generally so Jazz are getting Dalton plus 4 firsts. And then Houston's giving up 3 firsts and getting off DFS's contract and getting back Austin. I think that's a big price for Houston, and I think LA, I don't think they'd give up Austin and a first for Kessler. And I know that's going to be a divisive topic in the chat, but I think they would think that's an overpay. It's an interesting trade. I think that's a lot of firsts for Kessler. I think he's more of a 2 first type player, but so I would say Houston and LA probably say no, but I like your general thinking. And I think if you reduce the picks, you might be able to get into something that's realistic between the 3. But I think LA's valuation of Reeves versus Utah's valuation of, I think there's like several players that we continually talk about: Kessler, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones. I think the Lakers versus those teams, each side thinks they're giving up the better player and is going to want something else. And that's where I think it's hard to find a common ground. Tally Khalifa, is Dylan Brooks worth a first? I think he's worth a first if you're not giving up Rui. I think he's probably worth a first or relatively worth a first, like because you are giving up just not really like much for Phoenix other than financial flexibility. Looking at Brooks's contract, making 21.1 and then 19.9 next year. I like that it's descending. So 21.1, like you could get there. If it's Gabe, Kleba, and a first for Dylan Brooks, I think that's fair for Phoenix. They get off the extra year. They get a first out of it. For LA, you're really only flipping Gabe Vincent among your rotation guys. And if you're turning Gabe Vincent into Dylan Brooks, that's a notable upgrade in my opinion. I think he's good enough to be the 5th starter and then have Smart, Vando, and Rui. Like now I think there's a lot more balance with the group where it's Ayton, LeBron, Brooks, Austin, Luka, with the bench being Smart, Rui, Vando, Jake, and then Jackson. And maybe you could even pry like a Nick Richards or one of their 10 million centers. And then that's maybe like the backup. That's interesting to me. I think the one thing is Brooks is kind of more of I think a 3-4 defender rather than, I think there are some 2s he could guard, not really a point guard defender. So I still think that group has like a little bit of issue with speed and athleticism in terms of defending it, but it's hard to find the perfect defender without giving up Austin or a first and swaps, or like you're gonna have to give up a lot to get probably like the perfect type of guy. So I think Brooks is like good enough to make a real difference, especially if the cost is from like a rotation perspective. Like I'm also typically of the mindset, I think you guys have heard me now evaluate like hundreds of trades. Like I'm always more on the side of like just trade the pick. I get like some people are more cautious with it. I'm just like, if you have a chance, like go for it. And I do think Dylan Brooks, especially if it's one thing if you're going from Rui to Dylan Brooks, which we can debate how much of an upgrade that actually even is. I think it's a big defensive upgrade. I think it's it's a downgrade on offense. And then you kind of weigh those things of like, I think in the net overall, it's probably an upgrade, but I think you could make a case for Rui being a better or at least like similar level player. Whereas if it's Gabe, I think it's just such an upgrade overall within the rotation. Like you're also now, think about it, you're going from having everyone in this rotation outside of Smart and Gabe is 6'5" and above. And Smart is a big 6'3". He's 6'3", but he's got, I believe, like 6'9" wingspan. He's 230, 235. He's a fire hydrant. He's a brick wall. And if you could flip Gabe into a 6'7", 6'8" Dylan Brooks, now you have this much bigger rotation. And I think just it flows better with the starters. It flows better with the bench. And I think he's a notable upgrade in that regard. You just got to get him to buy into the shot selection. Cage Britt, thank you for the super chat. It was such a good win tonight. What do you personally think LeBron would have added / made better in tonight's performance? It's a good question. So Chris Finch was asked about this pregame. He was asked about defending Luka and defending Luka by himself versus defending Luka with LeBron and how that changes when he knows it's going to be a steady diet of just Luka pick and roll, Luka cooking guys, and you don't have to account for LeBron and sort of like the pros and cons of that. And he said one of the big pros is that it's almost impossible to blitz and trap the Lakers or do it too frequently because of their passing and specifically because of having LeBron out there. He's like, if LeBron's out there, we can't really trap Luka because they're going to get into a 4-on-3 situation and LeBron is one of the best passers ever and he's going to pick you apart. So that is in part why they've gone to more switch heavy against, going back to the 2025 first round series. So I think LeBron would have just given them another, he's LeBron, so I don't feel like I even need to hit on every single thing he brings. But of course, he probably would have given you 25-7-7. Like he just can close his eyes and produce those numbers. But I think it would have been another playmaker and weapon in the 4-on-3 game, either as a passer or a finisher or both. And I would like to see more LeBron, Luka 2-man game. That's been something I've been harping on since the trade that we just have not quite seen. So I think that's something that once LeBron's back, they're going to start to work on more and hopefully develop. But I think offensively just helps with the non-Luka minutes as well. Imagine replacing any of Gabe or Marcus as the backcourt guy or Jake or Rui. You place one of those three with LeBron, it does shift the identity of the group. But I think LeBron and Austin plus three of the bench guys or 2 bench guys in Ayton, I think that works as a non-Luka lineup. So I think it improves the starters, improves the non-Luka groups defensively with his help defense and his ability as the low man when he's engaged. And I think he would have been engaged, especially just seeing how locked in this group was. So I think he would have helped on both sides of the ball. And that's another wrinkle here that makes this win even more impressive is they didn't have their second best player, a guy who at worst is a top 15 guy in the league. And you could argue is still a top 10 guy, and not having that player it's a big loss, and they still won. Kevin, following up on his trade idea, says, but Bane cost 4 firsts and a swap. My trade idea, Houston only gives up 3 firsts, and firsts are worse because this year's Houston first will not be the 16th pick. So, yeah, I think, I guess the Lakers would probably want to get a first in this scenario. So maybe if we reroute one of those firsts from the Jazz to the Lakers, I think that balances it out. And maybe LA is swapping their 31 first for a worse first. But optically, if you come out of it if you trade Austin and a first for Kessler, DFS and a first, that I think looks a bit differently, or it looks a bit different optically compared to not. So I think I hear what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I think it might be more flipping one of those to the Lakers instead of Houston getting that many firsts, if that makes sense. Or Utah getting that many firsts. Angelo, thank you for the super chat. Love the new shows you've been doing, Jovan. Thank you. I've been trying to, I've been grinding my face off, and it's been awesome. I've been having some YouTube problems, which I think I mentioned in the comments with my last video of, for some reason, like the first upload glitches out and I have no idea why. And then I have to re-upload it. And that takes like an extra 3 hours and then it uploads perfectly. I don't know what's been going on, but been trying to do a show or live every single day. Obviously just started the Lakers Collective with Jason and Trevor, then doing Beyond the Block, which is my national show once a week. So putting in more time watching other teams and tracking other teams and just making sure I know what's going on. So it's been a lot, but it's been really fun. And Lakers are going to Sacramento. I'm not going to be there. So we'll potentially do a playback or at least be able to go live a bit earlier because I can go live like directly at the buzzer or around there. But yeah, no, it's been a really fun start to the season, and I'm really enjoying the shift from beat writing plus podcasting and YouTube to just podcasting and YouTube, and being able to do this just on a daily basis, creating some more short form content. So I recommend you all check me out on YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram, X, all those places. Gary Singh, thank you for the super chat. Smart needs to start, makes everyone play better. 100% agree. And it's, I think sometimes when we make arguments for players to have a smaller role or to not start, it's not like to disparage Gabe at all or to criticize him. Like I thought Gabe had a really good preseason, and I think Gabe is I can see the logic and the reasoning behind JJ trusting Gabe so much. He is like the perfect role player for a coach because he's mature, he's professional, he buys into whatever you want, he's willing to do the dirty work, and like he plays within his means for the most part, right? Like sometimes the shot selection's a little bit questionable, but like outside of that, Gabe is a tough, hard-nosed guy who's going to go out there, listen to the game plan, and like execute it to the best of his ability. I just think the role that the Lakers currently have him in as their primary perimeter stopper is just a little bit above his abilities right now, right? So I think he's more of a secondary defender than a primary guy, and that's where like there are certain bench pairings where I think he's fine as long as he's not like the best defender in the lineup. But I think that's far more of a Marcus Smart or Jared Vanderbilt responsibility and role. I've given up on Vando starting. He was the ninth guy in terms of entering the game tonight. He did end up playing a bit more because he played small ball center with no Jackson. I think if Jackson plays, Vando's minutes are lower, and he's kind of going to be in that 12 to 15 minute range when everyone's like relatively healthy. So I don't see Vando being a real threat to start, whether you agree with that or not. But Smart, I think there's a real case that like he's played fewer minutes than Gabe in both games so far. And I know they're trying to be cautious with his workload and his minutes, but starting matters. Like I really dislike the notion that starting doesn't matter, because especially like if like there are some teams where maybe you have like, your number 5 spot through your number 8 spot. And I think the Lakers are kind of like this, where they're all relatively similar to a degree in terms of maybe overall impact. Although I would say that Smart has been like far ahead of Gabe so far. But there are plenty of teams like go through OKC and Denver and now Houston and Golden State. And like there's some changes there depending on like injuries or like Golden State's load managing Al Horford and whatever. But for the most part, those teams know who their 5 best players are. They know like these are the 5 starters, these are the 5 closers. And I don't think the Lakers are quite there yet, in part because LeBron is out. But I just don't see Gabe really being in that. I just don't think it makes sense as a starter or a closer. And Marcus makes far more sense. So I do think reallocating the minutes and the rotation breakdown to Marcus being a starter and Gabe being a bench player just makes all the sense in the world. I think it made more sense going into this game. I think the Lakers probably don't get off to as bad of a start if Marcus starts in Gabe's place. But we'll see. I mean, based on some of JJ's convictions, I feel like it's probably going to be Gabe. You could maybe make the case for Sacramento also with how many guards and perimeter guys they have that like you want a quicker guy, but still, I think Marcus has just been a straight up better defender. Sarah, what up, Sarah? Thank you for the super chat. JJ, 0 for 2 on coaches challenges could become an issue. Yeah, they had the challenge tonight. I'm blanking on. I know I tweeted about it. I think it was it. I'm looking at it quickly. It was the foul on Gabe that they challenged. Yeah. Yeah. It's not been good. It's not been good. But small sample size. We'll give him a break. It's been 2 challenges, but I certainly still need to monitor. Gary Singh, when Braun is back, what's our best closing lineup? Thank you for the super chat. I think I would say in general, I think it's probably going to be the starters, which to me should be Ayton, LeBron, Smart, Austin, Luka. I think there's some flexibility where maybe there's certain lineups you want or certain matchups you want Rui out there. Maybe there's certain matchups, and that could be in place of Smart. That could be maybe going small. Although I think we've seen enough small ball from the Lakers over the last few years that I think it's better to have a center out there, and most teams are playing a real center or even double big sometimes. Right. So I think that in theory is like the best lineup. I believe in having some level of flexibility, and I think Rui is like a starting level player. So they have to me kind of 6 starters. I just think with the defensive needs of the starting group, I've made the case for Smart a million times at this point. I think that's should be the primary closing lineup. I think you can make adjustments based on the personnel. And if it is like Sacramento and Sabonis is out and maybe you want to go to Ayton at that point, but maybe they're stretching you out and you go to Rui and you go a bit smaller with Rui, LeBron at the 4-5, which we've seen work at times, but I don't think should be a steady diet of that. So I think it should be the starting group, should be the closing group. And I think getting that group as many reps and minutes together is important because I believe starting matters, and I believe playing your best players and best lineups matters. Call me crazy. See, we got some D'Lo slander in the chat. Hen L, I don't think Smart has the health to be a starter or play. Starter and smarter. His name and start just keep messing me up. I don't know why. I don't think Smart has the health to be a starter or play 30 plus minutes a night. I'm not advocating for Smart to play 30 plus minutes a night because I think the Lakers are trying to be cautious with him. And it seems like he's more in that 22 to 25 minute range, but Gabe played 24 minutes tonight and he started. So I don't and going back to last season, Jackson started and there was plenty of games he played fewer than 20 minutes. So I think it's how you build out the rotation. But to me, the point I'm making is I think in general, the 4 most important parts of the game, right? Every minute matters, every possession matters. So I don't want to say that some possessions or minutes are not important or are necessarily less important. But in general, I believe the beginning of the first quarter, the end of the second quarter, the beginning of the third quarter, and obviously the end of the fourth quarter are the 4 most important stretches of a game, because beginning of first and third, that's the starters. And those are typically the 10 best players or each team's best lineup, best combination, whatever. End of fourth quarter is obviously crunch time. That's deciding the game. And the end of second quarter, that could be a big determinant in terms of momentum and just, I think the Lakers partly won this game by winning the end of the second quarter and having that really nice stretch. So those are to me the 4 most important parts of a game in general. And I think those are the areas I would those are the stretches I'd like to see Smart play in. I would like to see him start the first and third, close the second and fourth, and then, maybe get an extra shift in there because that's already 4 shifts of theoretically like 5 to 6 minutes. But that's how I envision his role. And I think, again, like Gabe's kind of been, I think he played a little bit more against Golden State, but it's not like Gabe's been playing 30 plus minutes. Like Gabe's still been in the 20s. So I think there is you can structure the rotation to have Smart play 22 to 25 and start, because I don't think Gabe, especially once LeBron comes back, I think he'll move back to the bench. And like, there's just I think a little bit of a limitation to that role, like overall, whether it is Smart or Gabe starting. Hen L, Jovan, do you think Luka gets MVP this year? It's tough to say without knowing where the Lakers are in the standings, right? Because I think it's certainly possible he puts up MVP caliber numbers, or like going back to 2024, you could argue he had the best numbers, but because Dallas was fit, he didn't win MVP. The 2023-24 season when he averaged 34, 9, and 10. So if he does something wild like that again, like if he averages 35 or 36, 9 and 10, or 10 and 10, or 10 and 11, like I'm not putting anything past Luka. He's just insane what his production. If the Lakers are a 5 or 6 seed, I think it's going to be long odds for him to win, just because I think OKC is clearly going to be, it's a funny week to say bet because of all the stuff going on, but I do not gamble. I do not bet. But if I were a betting man, I would bet all of my money on OKC winning at least 60 games, and maybe even like 64, 65 plus games. So like that's already going to put Shea in a pretty good position to repeat as MVP. You have Jokic, who a lot of people are projecting Denver to be a top 2 or 3 seed. So if they're top 2 or 3 seed and he, I assume, will bounce back to his normal production, like that puts him in a certain tier. And then Giannis, I think, will have a similar thing where he's probably, I think the Bucks are going to be too low in the standings for him to really compete. So I guess for me, it depends on if the Lakers are the 3 seed or maybe even the 4 seed, like top 4, I think Luka has a real shot and might so point being, I think you'd have to tell me where the Lakers are going to finish in the standings, which I think at this point, it's just kind of guessing, right? We don't know when LeBron's going to come back. We don't know their health for the season. Like right now, Smart is available, but Smart has played 54 games the last 2 years. If you tell me he's going to play 30 games, like I think that's going to make a real impact on this team in a negative way. So it's tough to say with the Lakers right now. I think in general, I've said they're probably a 4 to 6 seed for me. So if it's top 4, I think he's got a real shot. If it's 5 or 6, history suggests, especially with Shea and Jokic likely putting up similar numbers and being on potentially the top 2 or 3 seeds in the West, like that's where he might lose out some votes and ultimately not win. But I mean, if they're top 4, I think he's got a real shot. Zolf, thank you for the super chat. Assuming we sign AR to a long-term contract this offseason, do you see him as Luka's long-term on-court partner? I think it's too early to say. I think that, tonight was a step in the right direction, and I think there's been a lot of highs with the Austin-Luka pairing, and I've made the point before, looking at the 2022 run with Luka to the conference finals, the 2024 run to the finals, he has fared well with offensive-minded guards who are talented scorers and playmakers in Jalen Brunson and Kyrie Irving. Now, Kyrie is obviously at a different tier than Austin, so I'm not putting Austin on that tier. But Jalen Brunson, I think pre-New York Jalen Brunson and Austin, like I actually think Austin's the better player. So, like, yeah, I'm not saying he's going to become New York Jalen Brunson, but I think we have a blueprint of like, I think Luka likes having another ball handler out there, and I think he's thrived next to that type of player. I think the key is both of those Dallas rosters had a certain level of size and length and front court athleticism and two-way ability that the Lakers don't quite have right now. So I think it's about like building the next Lakers roster with the right types of players. And if this group had a Lively and Gafford center tandem and a PJ Washington and a Derrick Jones Jr., I think it's a little bit of a different conversation of like, I have more confidence in those guys fitting around a Luka Austin pairing. So I think it can work. I just think it's a bit of a narrow roster. Like, if you're committing to those two guys being two of your top three players, you need to nail the front court. And I don't think the Lakers have nailed the front court in terms of defense, length, athleticism, all that stuff. So I think it's possible, but I would like to see a bigger sample size. I want to see the next 80 games, and I want to see the playoffs. And that the playoffs are really where it's going to be determined, right? We saw Austin have a really impressive regular season, and then he tailed off in the playoffs for various reasons, injuries, matchup, whatever, like his limitations, whatever it be. There were several reasons why he didn't play as well against Minnesota. And if he struggles again in the playoffs and or doesn't shoot well in the playoffs as a catch and shoot guy, that changes my opinion about like the long-term trajectory of Luka and Austin. But I would say I'm bullish overall for now, but I do think you have to nail the front court. And I think that does lend itself to a different roster build than we've seen from the Lakers over the last few years. Bashir says 0 for 3 on challenges if you count the preseason one against the Kings. Yeah, it's okay, you guys are convincing me it's a problem. G says a Herb Jones type player would be a dream addition. 100% agree. I think he's like as close to a perfect player. I'm missing super chats. Okay. Sorry, Arno. I missed you. Arno, thank you for the super chat. I've dealt with sciatica for years. The way Braun is moving around, I'm starting to think LeBron's sciatica isn't that serious. Can it be a play from Braun? All right. I'm going to say no, to be clear. Like I don't really want to get too much into this stuff because the last show I spoke about this, I got aggregated out of context, and then I got harassed for like 24 hours and threatened online and stuff. So I don't really want to go down this road with this stuff, but I will say I do not believe that it's like a play or everything I've heard about it is it's serious, it's real, it's, so make of that what you will. But I don't think that this is a play. I think to your point, it could be a sign that he's coming back within the next couple of weeks, right? Like we're starting to get to the period where he can be reevaluated. And I think there'll be a bit of a ramp up period, but I think if anything, that would be like more of a bullish sign. Like I can't speak to, I've never dealt with sciatica, so I don't know what that looks like in terms of your movements. And like I have an idea, but if you have the firsthand experience here, so if anything, I would view it more as like a positive that LeBron just could be back sooner. C2 cents, hashtag free Buha. Seriously, we got, let's just not aggregate me, please. Let's just, and then it got, the one thing I will say to like defend myself is anyone who's been listening for a while, like I grew up a LeBron fan. I've said he's one of my 3 favorite players. I've often, when presented questions about LeBron versus the Lakers, I've typically taken LeBron's side. I just voted for him 5th in MVP and 5th in first team All-NBA. So the notion by a subsect of people that I'm like this LeBron hater is just, it's pretty laughable to me. Kerwin, thank you for the super chat. Really difficult to have that blueprint if we're spending a chunk of money to LBJ. Discount needs to happen, I believe. I think you're talking about the front court blueprint around Luka and Austin. And yeah, I mean, this is what makes next summer so interesting because we still don't know how much longer LeBron's going to play. If he does play beyond this season, is he going to be a Laker or not? Right. And if he is a Laker, like what does that look like? Is it on a max contract? Is he taking a discount? I find it hard to envision a scenario in which LeBron is like a minimum player or a mid-level player for the Lakers or anybody else. So I do think there will be a certain standard with the contract of, he said before, he wants to like keep playing at like an all-star, like he wants to hang it up the second he stops being like an all-star level guy or like a really effective player. I think he's going to continue to be an all-star level, all-NBA level, really effective player. So it's going to be interesting to see how that situation plays out in terms of what the next contract looks like, either as a Laker or elsewhere. And if it is as a Laker, the number is going to be really important because that's going to determine how they build out the rest of the roster. And with having Rui as an expiring, and Gabe as an expiring, and Maxey as an expiring, and Marcus Smart and DeAndre Ayton having player options, there's a chance that the Lakers have like half the roster, in free agency next summer. So making those decisions on who they retain, who they don't retain, like those are all big factors here. So yeah, I don't have a good sense right now as to like what his next contract will look like with the Lakers or elsewhere. And again, we don't even know if he's going to continue to play beyond this season. I assume that he will, and that if he was going to retire, there would have been an announcement. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because that number will go a long way in terms of determining the Lakers' flexibility. Omara says KD contract would be nice for LeBron. Yeah, so KD's contract, he just got the $90 million extension, which was $30 million under his max. So he took a discount. It's actually not listed here, but oh no. Yeah, it is. Yeah, so he's making 43.9 and then 46. So yeah, I mean, maybe that's a bit of a blueprint, but it's hard to say at this point, right? Like we got to see, like there's so many factors with LeBron and the roster that it's hard to project where they'll be at in June and July. Sir Knight, WL Gaming. I swear JJ internally was treating Golden State as a preseason game because the 2-day break between games and both at home. Tonight was JJ's opener. What's interesting with this is I can see the logic. JJ did note that because they played Friday and then Friday was the preseason finale. Then they played Tuesday. They had 3 days off and 2 days of practice. So he swore that they were preparing for Golden State specifically and like using it as extra prep that you rarely have during the regular season. And then they were going to again do the same thing against Minnesota. But to your point, I felt they were far more prepared and had a far better game plan against Minnesota than they did against Golden State. And maybe part of it was getting punched in the mouth against the Warriors and really tightening certain things up and polishing and sharpening certain things. But to me, like they had a far more coherent defensive game plan, and offensively, the 4-on-3s, the way they handled the different Minnesota pick and roll coverages was at a much higher level than it was against the Warriors. So, and there's also the intangible of this is the team that beat you last postseason. And I had said going into this game, I wanted to see some fire. I wanted to see some urgency from this group, some vigor, and we saw it. So that was very encouraging. Asian Boy, thank you for the super chat. Or sorry, thank you for the question. Not a super chat, but I appreciate it. Which restricted free agents would you sign next offseason to be with Luka in the long-term future? The issue here is players just rarely sign qualifying offer sheets in restricted free agency because for the Lakers' sake, for example, it ties you up. It ties up your cap situation until there's a decision made and the opposing team almost always matches. And even if they're not going to match, what they will do as a tactic is just let it sit and then let that, they've shortened the process of the wait period. I believe it's a couple days or somewhere around there, 48, 72 hours, something like that. But you are effectively like signing that player, or your cap situation is as if you sign that player during that period. So all of a sudden, like, free agency is this giant game of musical chairs, and you start to miss out on other opportunities. So even if you are going to let a player leave, it's in your best interest to milk that clock until the last second and then make your decision of, okay, we're not signing it. So, or matching it. So teams have become hesitant to sign players to restricted free agency. And that's where we saw this multiple stalemates with Giddey and Kuminga and Grimes. And it's really become like the most punitive contract situation for all these players is restricted free agency, because you're almost forced into re-signing with your team and at like probably below market value. So I don't want to say the Lakers like can't sign a restricted free agent, but it's becoming less and less feasible. And I think a far more likely outcome would be either signing a free agent, depending on what happens with LeBron, or trading for a player. G-Dog, Rudy Gobert is the worst center I've ever seen. I do not agree with that, but I will say, like, Rudy, he really mucks up the spacing with Minnesota. And there was like several possessions where that I can remember where it would be like someone would start to drive or have an advantage against their Lakers defender, and Gobert would like flash into the middle of the paint for whatever reason, and it would just like kill the driving lane. And he does that so continually. And the fact of the matter is he's just not really a threat in there. So like, even if you want to flash to the middle of the paint, like, Minnesota's not trying to generate a bunch of Rudy hook shots in the middle of the floor. So yeah, he's one of the greatest defensive centers of all time, and multi-time defensive player of the year. But I think offensively is where he causes a bunch of issues. FMZ, AR didn't get a single offer during restricted free agency. Kuminga got punked too. Ayton is the last guy I remember getting a legit offer elsewhere, but Phoenix matched Indiana. Yeah, it's just the way it goes right now. So it's tough. FMZ also says Rudy Abdul-Jabbar beat the crap out of us during the playoffs. That was more like Rudy Chamberlain or Rudy O'Neal. I mean, look, that's what happens when you play small lineups. Sarah says JJ's been plotting for the Wolves since the playoff exit. This is true. And it was funny yesterday at practice when he talked about, he said he was going down multiple film rabbit holes, and that he was watching like inverted pick and rolls with Marcus Smart and how Marcus defended it, and how he wanted the Lakers to defend that against the Wolves. And that he was just going down some weird rabbit holes with film and just thinking through like different scenarios. So yeah, JJ has been ready for this one, and it was encouraging to see. It's one thing to say that, and it's another thing to actually execute it. And I thought, obviously, the group executed it tonight. Jacoby Parks, I like how this team did less side-to-side movement on offense and actually went downhill with Luka and AR improvising and allowing for Rui to get open corner threes and for DA to get easy finishes. Yeah, that's been one of the key developments here. I don't know what Austin was on paint shots. He was 2 for 5 on threes, so he went 7 for 10 on twos. So between he and Luka went 9 for 10. So that's 16 for 20 on two. So across the two games, well, Luka's 24 for 27, and I think Austin was 5 for 6 the first one. So trying to do some quick math. He's like 12 for 16. So it's 39 out of 43. I think there's something crazy like 39 out of 43 or 39 out of 44 on 2-pointers combined, which is just absurd. Maybe 40, yeah, maybe 45, 46, something like that. But basically they're shooting combined over 80% on twos. And then obviously individually Luka's at like basically 90%. So I think that's been, and that was actually what I asked JJ about pregame, and he like acknowledged that kind of like along my line of thinking of last year, Minnesota was fine switching Gobert and Reed and Randall onto Luka and LeBron and Austin and daring them to beat them off the dribble and believing that those guys could stay with them credibly enough and or funnel them into help, and that they couldn't generate advantages with their speed and their ball handling and whatnot. And we saw like at times, I think like Luka still averaged 30. So I don't want to be revisionist history and say like he didn't have a good series, because I think he did, but he wasn't getting downhill as much. He wasn't as much of a threat inside the arc as he is right now. Austin obviously struggled with that against Minnesota. And then LeBron, I thought, also became a bit more jump shot dependent and was not beating those guys off the dribble as much. So I think with Luka and Austin being able to get downhill as easily and as frequently as they've been able to, that's like arguably like, for me, it's like Luka looking the way he's looked is like number one sign of encouragement. Number two is Luka and Austin together being able to beat their man, get downhill off pick and rolls, get downhill against different coverages, and either score for themselves or play make. And those to me right now are like the two biggest positives overall with the way that the Lakers season has started. So 100% agree with you. Bino, do you think Braun makes over $40 million next year, considering it is known from his words that this could be his last year, so a team would be giving up $40 for a 1-year rental? Any more suspect, no matter how good he is. 40-ish seems about realistic. Like maybe he takes a bit of a pay cut, but I feel like that's probably around the number that it ends up at, whether that's the Lakers or elsewhere. But who knows? I mean, maybe he got like, I wouldn't be surprised if someone gives him the max, like for a 1 year, like having a year of LeBron would, but obviously it comes down to what's his criteria for where he wants to play. Is it about the money? Is it about winning? Is it about city and location? There's a lot of factors that we don't really know. I think he can get pretty much enough money from just about anybody that I think it would probably be more of like the winning and location factor, but I don't want to pretend to know what he's thinking with this situation. John, do you think Rob should try to acquire Brooks, Goodwin, and O'Neal? I would like, I'd be okay with Goodwin as like a throw-in for one of the other two. I would like him in a vacuum, but I don't think there's like a clear trade that makes sense for him. If you could get Brooks and Goodwin, Brooks and O'Neal, or O'Neal and Goodwin, I like any of those combinations. So yeah, those are the types of, I think Brooks is the one starting level player here. Goodwin and O'Neal are more like sharpening up your bench. But yeah, I'm on board with Brooks. G-Dog, how much longer until Mark Walter takes over? They're presenting to the board or, you know, like a modified board of governors. So it could be by the end of the month. That is the word right now, that there's a chance the sale is finalized by the end of this month, which would be like within the next week. That seems to be like on the quicker side. So it could, I feel like it's going to be done by Thanksgiving, but like realistically within the next month, I think it'll be done, but there's a chance it's done within the next week. Sir Knight WL Gaming, I believe in the past LeBron said he would never play for less than the max. That's to my recollection as well. So I maybe at 41 going into 42 he plays for less, but that's why, remember, like I going back to the offseason, I kept saying LeBron, like I kept getting questions about, is LeBron going to take less? Is he going to take this big pay cut? Is he going to take the mid, allow them to get the mid-level? I was like, no, he's going to go for the most money possible. And obviously there was no extension talks between the two sides, so he just opted in and he got the most money possible. Bino, what do you think of Kuminga on the Lakers? I've actually done a bit of a reverse on my Kuminga stance. Like this version of Kuminga, I've been really impressed with. And I was really impressed with his defense against Luka. I was impressed with his defense against the Nuggets. I think he's buying into his role. They obviously had a tough loss tonight. I didn't get a chance to watch it. Looking at it tonight, 16 points in 24 minutes, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. Like in some ways, he's kind of what you want Rui to be, although I don't know if it's fair to compare. They are different players because Kuminga's far more of like a self-created shot guy, and I think he's a better defender. So I think the version of him we're seeing right now, and like you just never know with some of these guys, like there's always like kind of first day of school vibes where you start the season off on your best behavior and then you progressively kind of devolve into your bad habits. And with Kuminga, there are certainly some habits that he has had in the past that have prevented him from having a larger role or a more consistent role that right now he's in the good graces with the coaching staff, but like he does have a bit of a track record where he's lost that good faith from the coaching staff. So I say all that to say, like, I would certainly be open to it if I'm the Lakers. I don't know what exactly that would look like. And if I'm the Warriors, I don't know if I could stomach trading Jonathan Kuminga to the Lakers. It does feel like they're headed for a divorce, but who knows? Maybe he really thrives in this role and making 22.5, and then he's got the team option 24.3. This isn't factoring in. Yeah, so that's not his. No, that is okay. Sorry, these numbers keep throwing me off, but yeah, that is his. He's got the 22.5 this year, 24.3 next year with the team option, which is pretty attractive if I'm a potential Kuminga suitor. But yeah, I mean, if you could do Gabe, Kleba in a first, I would do that in a heartbeat. I just don't think that's enough. Sir Knight WL Gaming, reading non-super chats is goated, had to tip. I try to get to everything. I know it's not possible, but I try to hit as much as I can. All right, going about 5 more minutes here. A real 5 minutes, not a Jovan 5 minutes. Andrew, don't need to give up valuable draft capital. Are you talking about Kuminga? Because I think like no one's just taking Gabe and Maxey like unless you're getting off of a bad contract. But the Lakers don't want to take on a bad contract. So if you're getting a decent to good contract and you expect to give up Gabe and Maxey, you have to give up draft capital. There's no way around that. SSSJ Little Ghost, is Luka going for 40 every game good for the Lakers moving forward? I think the roster around Luka should take some load out of him. I think that's going to happen once LeBron is back. I think for now, I don't think he needs to go for 40 every game, but we are seeing some of the shot creation limitations outside of Austin. Ayton has been far more of a finisher. Rui, I thought, had some nice, quick decision, like pull-up jumpers tonight, but he still is more of a finisher than a self-creator. Gabe did some self-creation in the preseason, but we haven't really seen it yet in the regular season. Haven't really seen it from LaRavia. Haven't really seen it from Smart. And then Dalton took one shot, and that was in garbage time. So, and yeah, it's not Vando. So it's like, yeah, I mean, they're in a tough spot offensively where I think they have shooting and skill and passing and spacing overall, but it is very dependent on Luka and Austin creating advantages until LeBron is back. Young Lito, Jovan, why do people talk about Brooks trades? They have literally no reason to trade him because they don't own their first and we have nothing of value to help them right now. Well, I'm assuming any Brooks trade, the Lakers are giving up a first, which would be of value to Phoenix. I think to your point, Phoenix is also a little delusional and they want to be more competitive. I think the bigger thing with why Phoenix might do this would just be if we're around like January or going into the trade deadline and they are like 12th in the West. I think the prudent thing to do would be to sell off some parts. Like, I don't know that Dillon Brooks is necessarily going to be part of the next good Phoenix team. There's a chance he is. They don't own their pick, but I think you can still, depending on the asking price and depending on the return, get some value for rotation players that aren't necessarily helping you this season. So I think there will be a market for Dillon Brooks if he is made available. And I think if they could get, like, they save some money, which is, for previous ownership was a big thing. This ownership, it's kind of unclear, although they have been, remember they had the years in the second apron, and it's been a thing that if they could kind of make some of that money back by saving some, that could be attractive to them. But I think the bigger thing would be getting a pick. And that's on a matter of like, would the Lakers do that or would another team do that? I think you could talk me into a Dillon Brooks pick if you're not giving up. Like, if it's Gabe and Kleba, you're basically flipping Gabe for Brooks, putting the pick aside. And I think that's a notable upgrade for the Lakers rotation. Telly Khalifa, is Rui going to be a free agent next year? I forgot when his extension deadline is. His extension deadline is June 30th. So it's actually the day before he can be a free agent. So they have plenty of time to figure it out. I don't think an extension is imminent right now, but I think it'll probably come down to his performance, and the Lakers have no rush really to do it. Young Lido said that would be a value for in the future, though, or am I bugging? You're talking about Brooks here or the pick? Cage Britt, have you heard any positive news on DK? Is he progressing in practice or anything like that? He's apparently been doing really well in practice. It just has not translated to games. He's a hard worker. Hear good things about him getting there early, staying late. He's in the gym a lot, but it has not translated. Young Lido, if Rui extends, does that not make him tradable this year? It depends on the number. So I don't know the exact cap mechanics off the top of my head, but like what I think if it's under a certain percentage, like Daniel Gafford had an extension with Dallas that at the time the reaction was, oh, he can't be traded. But then all the cap people came out, were like, no, he can't be traded. So I believe there's a number or a percent increase over your current salary that if it's that number or less, you can still be traded. If it's more, you can't be traded for 6 months. I think with Rui, he would probably fall in that range where I don't think he would get a massive bump on his current number. He's at just under 19. I could see a bump into like the low 20s. I think even mid 20s is pushing it compared to some of the contracts we just saw. Like Christian Brown's making $25 million. And I think there's a gap between a Christian Brown and a Rui. So feels like to me, if he does get an extension, he's more of 360, 364, 366, maybe at most. So somewhere in that 360-ish range. And if, again, that like small percentage bump, I think he would still be technically trade eligible. A-Dub, I showed up late and the late night gang is still up hella late. That's what we do here. We do not sleep. Ronnie, I feel like Luka did take the load off today the way he played compared to last game against the Warriors. Yeah, he was able to take the load. Like Luka got tired at various points of this game. Like he certainly was tired at the end of the first quarter. There was a couple of possessions where you could just see like he was gasping for air because he was doing so much. And he had 32 in the first half, finished with 49. So only 17 only in the second half, and certainly like did less progressively, but I mean, it's hard to say a guy with 49 and 8 took, less compared to the other game, but like, I get what you're saying. It did feel like they were a little bit more reliant on him for success offensively versus Golden State, where tonight Austin had a better game, Rui had a better game, Ayton had a better game. And in general, I thought the ball was snapping around. The pace was better. They were more organized. Like there was a lot. It was a much better process, I think, and that took a little bit off of Luka. Cage Britt. Jovan, do you think today's third quarter performance was more based on motivation versus the Wolves, or do you think they're actually making the right adjustments out of halftime going forward? So this will lend itself to a funny couple of anecdotes here. JJ said they did not make any adjustments going into the second half, and they made routine adjustments. He would not specify what that was. I know a couple guys came out to shoot earlier than normal. Austin said that the message was basically don't have a shitty third quarter from the coaching staff. So at least the way they're publicly positioning it, there was not really much that changed from the first half to the second half. I think the Lakers at that point had regained a certain level of momentum and rhythm, and they carried that into the third quarter. And I think there is a motivation or human aspect to like being hyper aware that we've been a bad third quarter team. So like, let's not shoot ourselves in the foot to start the third quarter again. But so between these two, I guess the adjustment was whatever routine stuff. You know, JJ's joke that he's just like told guys to whatever you do at halftime, do like the exact opposite or like tweak something. Like don't do your exact routine. And I feel like that's a little tongue in cheek, but maybe it worked, I guess. Chris says, like the live people, he's about to call it. Yes. Let's get those likes up. Andrew, tuning in from Sydney. Love your work, Jovan. Go Lakers. Shout out to Andrew. Shout out to Sydney. Hen says, I'm in the East Coast. Thank God it's a Friday night. Yeah, happy Friday. It's now, I guess, technically Saturday morning. All right, Mario, I'll wrap here with this final super chat. Mario, have you bought any of Luka's shoes since the trade? I have not. I'm kind of weird with like, you know, people have asked me about being a fan or like rooting for stuff. And like, I'm a little weird with that. And I'm kind of, for that same reason, weird with buying like jerseys or shoes or like maybe memorabilia. You know, like I have some figures and stuff behind me. So like that would be something that maybe, you know, they have like the Funko NBA figures or whatever that I like, but I have not. The last pair of basketball shoes I bought were the Book Ones, and I got those on sale. One of the perks of traveling to Portland is the Lakers will put us on the Nike employee or the list for the Nike employee store where everything is 40% off. So went to the Nike employee store and they had Giannis's, they had Books, they had LeBron's, they had obviously like a bunch of Nike shoes, and I liked the Books aesthetically the most, and I also kind of felt like there's less conflict of interest. But typically, I've actually tended to kind of buy like older basketball shoes to not feel there's something just about like covering a player, covering a game or whatever, and being like, I play in his basketball shoes. That just doesn't sit right with me. Although, you know, obviously if you're a fan, like I think you should buy his shoes and rep Luka as much as you want. But Ant Vershay, who's the better looking? I assume you mean shoes here. Despite the advertisement for Ant, and they've crushed it. It's like 10 out of 10, 80s, 90s vibes with the ad run they're on. I like Shay's shoe better. Chris says, Buha, Booker fan. It all makes sense. I like the shoes. I like him as a player. Young Lito, what do you think the price is for Thibault? I've talked about him before. I think he's a tricky player for the Lakers to acquire because he's in like the same price range as Gabe and Kleba. He's making a little bit more. But I was looking tonight at the box score. He played 15 minutes, second best plus minus, plus 22. I mean, he's a big part of their defense off the bench. I think they could get him for like a good second or maybe like a couple of middling seconds, but the Lakers only have 1 second to trade. So I think he's kind of in a weird, price point for LA. Chris says us Luka fans despise him. I get it, but he's Luka's gotten the better of him. We will say that, right? I think that's fair to say. And look, I rock with Luka. He's my Balkan brate. Technically, he's got some Serbian in there, but we don't have to get into that. But I'm going to wrap here. I went a little bit over and answered another question after I said I was going to answer my final one. I appreciate you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. On the road to 50K subscribers by the end of 2025. Let's make it happen. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Sunday, going live after Lakers Kings. I will talk to you all then. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Hope you have a great rest of your night, morning, whatever time it is. Wish you all the best Saturday.